Hey guys, it's Quickie Baby bringing you a preview of the new Tier 5 British premium tank, the Excelsior. Here you can see it, I'm on the 8.6 test server. What do you need to know about this tank? It's a surprisingly fast heavy tank at Tier 5 with great frontal and rear armor, but a lacking gun. That's my snapshot of this tank. Now let's go into it with a little bit more detail. So we can see that the tank has 670 hit points, which is about the same region of other Tier 5 heavy tanks. It's fairly heavy at 41 tons with a 600 brake horsepower engine, which means that this thing can shift up to its top speed, which is a very high 38.6 kilometers an hour for a heavy tank. 38 is very high for a heavy tank at Tier 5, and even at any tier really. The tank's traverse speed is 32 degrees a second. And now let's take a quick look at the tank's armor. This is very interesting. The frontal armor on this tank is 114 millimeters. The side armor of this tank has a bit of spaced armor, but on paper it is 31 millimeters. And from experience, the sides of this tank are paper thin and really it can be decimated by any tank. Now the rear of this tank is exceptional. It's got 108 millimeters of plate armor at the back, which means quite often when I've been flanked by the enemy, I will not expose my side armor and I'll just let them have the rear of my tank, and I'll turn my turret and face them and keep shooting. Now the turret armor on this tank is fairly alright. It's 114 at the front, 92 at the side and 92 at the rear, which is all round fairly strong, but as it does not have a mantlet and the fact that it's very flat means that really any tank with 130 pen plus will go through the turret constantly. And because the rate of fire is so high, as I will highlight in a second, you are not really able to angle your turret in between shots. However, if you're literally just trying to tank the enemy, then maybe turning your turret sideways like this will give you a great angle of your turret armor, considering the side of your turret is strong as well, and you might be able to bounce if you can see they're taking advantage of your turret. I would angle the tank like this frontally. Hopefully the tracks can absorb some damage, and also you get an opportunity to bounce some shots. And the MG port is a slight weakness, but I need to do some more testing on this. For several reasons, it's been very hard to get good examples of gameplay on the test server. One, everyone's firing premium rounds, which means that really testing this tank is quite tricky. Secondly, there are hardly any tier 3 and 4 tanks playing, which are really the tanks that this monster can take advantage of. And finally, quite often you get into a game with only artillery or even only 5 tanks either side. So now we've looked at the armor of this tank, let's take a look at the gun, which is one of the weak points of this tank. It has a really good rate of fire of 15.79, which is excellent for a tier 5 tank. However, its penetration with regular ammo lets it down with 91 millimeters of penetration, even as low as 68 millimeters of penetration on the 75 millimeter cannon that it gets. With APCR this is better. Its minimum roll is 108, with its average roll being 144, but the shells are fairly expensive, as you can see here, 2,800 a shot, firing nearly 16 rounds a minute. That's going to be a very fast way to spend money. The accuracy of the gun is a fairly poor 0.42. That's not horrific, but that's really quite bad considering the rate of fire of this tank, and you really want to have short to medium range engagements for this tank to be effective. The aim time is a fairly standard 2.3 seconds. I must make a quick mention that I find that this tank plays out fairly similarly to the T14. It's the same tier, it's premium, they have roughly the same hit points. The T14 is slightly heavier and it gets the slightly more powerful engine to compensate for that weight. The Excelsior is 4 kilometers an hour faster, but its traverse speed is much better. The T14 has a horrific traverse of 20, whereas the Excelsior's traverse is 32. Now, while the T14's armor is angled, it's fairly thin, 50 millimeters, compared to the frontal plate on the Excelsior of 114, which means at range, if you angle your armor with the Excelsior, it's probably got a better chance to bounce than the T14 does. However, if you just have your tank flat on, then probably the angles on the T14 will work out better than on the Excelsior. The Excelsior does have a few weak points, the MG port, but I need to do some more testing on the front of this tank to see if this really does have the troll armor that I think it does. Apart from that, The turret traverse is slightly better on the Excelsior, and the view range is better. So the Excelsior is a more mobile tank than the T14, with better rear, much better rear armor, and much better frontal armor on paper, but the angles change that depending on the dynamics of where you're engaging this tank from. But basically the Excelsior is, in my opinion, a slightly better T14. So let's take a quick look at some gameplay to see this tank in action. So here we can see we're playing the new map, Sacred Valley, in the standard game mode. This map does have an encounter, which you should go and look at my 8.6 review of Sacred Valley if you want to hear my discussion about the encounter. But here we can see me playing the new British Tier 5 premium tank, the Excelsior, on the standard game mode of this new map. So immediately, look how fast the Excelsior is. It's able to really keep up with such tanks as the KV-1S, which you've got to really consider as more of a medium speed kind of heavy. Look at the great undulations. I feel that this is a very strong hill to take because it gives you some artillery cover. And we can see there's a cheeky ELC. Rather punchy gun. Putting my shots in third person on the move. Now, I don't want to expose my side armor really, but I kept my frontal armor to the Excelsior. Now we're going to have some trouble in penetrating. I decide to go after the ELC. Now I decide I'm going to keep my frontal armor to the Excelsior. He can't really penetrate me. And hope the ELC doesn't hit me and he misses. So we can see this Excelsior's having quite trouble penetrating me until he gets my side armor. And now I've got his side armor. And it becomes a case of, let's just shoot each other till we die. But we managed to take out 2 ELCs and an Excelsior there. You saw how good the armor is on this tank unless your side armor is exposed. Fortunately, we don't know what kind of ammo this Churchill is firing. It was able to easily go through us with the first shot. He hits our track this time, he aims at our turret, and he takes us out. Really, this just showcases the brutal nature of this tank. It's able to bully lightly armored targets, but as soon as it has to go up something which is well armored and can penetrate it, it gets destroyed. So now we're playing the Excelsior on hills. Let's speed things up a bit to get into the combat. We can see we're able to get into position very quickly with the good top speed. And oh dear, we got Hellcat hit, and the Hellcat is the perfect tank really to be taking out an Excelsior. Excelsior can't really bounce anything that high caliber. I must mention as well that the Excelsior does seem to get premium matchmaking, which means that it cannot meet tanks which are higher than tier 6. Unfortunately, that means that it can meet tier 6 artillery in this new patch, because it seems like artillery now get matchmaking like regular tanks, maybe slightly worse than regular tanks actually. I think maybe shifted 1 up, but they can meet tanks which are 1 tier lower than them. And I think that's pretty brutal, considering that M44 can basically one-hit us if it hits anywhere on the tank. Now you're going to get to see what the Excelsior can do. You can manage to hide its track but use its great frontal armor. Watch this, as we're not going to lose any health to these tanks and absorb a hell of a lot of their fire. That was an artillery splash. I'm aiming at the turret. I realise I can't go through the turret, so I aim at the mid plate. And this is the problem with the Excelsior. The fact its penetration is low, so you have to aim at weak points. I know that that mid plate is very weak on the Churchill 3. We can see he's unable to go through our armor. But as he's not angling, we're able to punish him. So now we're playing on steps in the Excelsior. Let's speed it up a bit and get straight into the gameplay. Here we can see there's a Hellcat engaging us again. No, his armor's very weak. Excelsior has got good gun depression, which means that it can shoot over ridgelines like this and hide most of its bulky hull armor. Just speed the gameplay up a little bit. You can see we took a hit there from the Panzer IV's. So here I want to show you an example of how the Excelsior can outmaneuver its opponents and try and mitigate the disadvantage that it has of a low penetrating gun. Here I fire on the move at the Su-100Y, and it basically moves like a medium tank. We're able to successfully flank that Su-100Y and take him out very easily. Now I see a full health TOG. Let's go after him. Just going to speed it up a little bit. Now one thing that's quite confusing about the patch at the moment is, listen to this. It says bounce off, but that was yellow damage. That takes the track off, but it says ricochet? Bounce off? But I'm keeping him tracked. So I got him tracked, and now I'm going to shoot him in the hull to do damage to him and take him out. Bizarre, hey? That's a little bug. Maybe it'll be fixed. But if you're doing track damage, it shouldn't be saying bounce off and ricochet. One thing that's very interesting about that tracking shot that you guys just saw me do is that it resulted in some very tasty experience and also what they now call assist damage, as you can see in this screenshot. So here are the post-game stats for that Excelsior game on Steps. And check it out. In that short time that we engaged that TOG, we managed to get 1065 assist damage. So assist damage is now either spotting or shooting the track. And wow, that enabled us to get 1342 experience in a very quick and rather low damaging game. We didn't really do much apart from engage that TOG and really track him. Fair enough, we killed the Su-100Y, but I think that is something to look out for, that tracking targets is now very valuable. If you can't penetrate a tank, then why not just track them and get lots of experience and credits that way? I'll cover this more in one of my other videos, so definitely check them out. So what do I think about the Excelsior? I think that the gun has got very low penetration, but if you aim at weak points and use it as like a heavy flanker, then I think you can mitigate this weakness. And if you really need to win, then there's always that chance that you can fire premium for credits, although you can have to fire the shots very sparingly, because as we can see we made 46,000 credits this game. So if we were to fire 15 shots, that'd be all our profit for the game just simply gone. I think that the armor on this tank is fantastic. The fact that it's got great frontal armor and great rear armor. I think if you angle this tank well against tier 3 tanks, I think it's going to be an absolute behemoth. Against tier 4 tanks, an absolute behemoth. Against tier 5s, it may be able to hold its weight, but as soon as it has to engage tier 6, they'd just be able to blast through your frontal armor and take you for everything that you've got. But at least this tank does get preferential matchmaking, and as far as I was aware, it can't meet tier 7s. One thing that's very interesting, in its current state, this tank can meet tier 6 artillery. That's artillery with Hummel guns, basically. Current Hummel guns. So effectively, this tank can meet tier 5 artillery in the current game, which are being rescaled to tier 6. And that's pretty brutal. But that's going to be happening to all of the tanks, so I'd hate to see what's going to happen to the TOGs. TOGs are, in theory, going to be able to meet tier 6 or tier 7 artillery. I haven't really investigated it fully myself, but I think a TOG is now going to be able to meet, for example, the new Tiger artillery, which has got a howitzer which does up to 2000 damage with 100mm of penetration. It's pretty interesting, and we'll take a look at my other artillery video where I'm going to discuss the changes in more detail. Will I be buying an Excelsior myself? Probably not. I've already got a TOG, and I think I play the TOG for the lols. The Excelsior really isn't going to be the lols. It could be quite fun to try and carry a game in it. If you get a really nice matchup in this tank where maybe you're one of the only tier 5 tanks, maybe this tank will be much better in theory, meeting tier 5 tanks and even tier 4 and even tier 3 tanks that previously were firing heat with a 105. The heat with a 105 will still go through the side of this tank, and it will go through the front of this tank occasionally, but most of the time the heat is going to bounce off, and that will allow you to tear through the enemy with their weaker armor. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed this preview of the Excelsior, the Tier 5 British heavy premium tank. Tell me in the comments below, are you going to get one? Do you think this tank is awful? Do you think it's good? Do you think it's better than the T14 Heavy, the current American Tier 5 premium heavy tank? Do you think that this is just a copy of it, just making it slightly faster? Tell me what you think in the comments. If you've liked this video, think about rating it below. I'd really appreciate it. And if this is your first time watching me, why not subscribe? As always guys, you've been epic. Think about checking out my other 8.6 preview videos, and hopefully I'll see you soon.